Hey, what's up, everyone? So, we all know preparation is a key in all aspects of life. Whether you're preparing for a project, a presentation, a trip, or a challenge, being well prepared increases your chances of success and relieves anxiety. That's because a well prepared mind is a confident mind. And that's why I partnered up with My Patriot Supply. Since 2008, My Patriot Supply has helped millions of Americans gear up for emergencies. Today, their popular 4-week emergency food kits can't stay out of customers' carts. You can go on my website, preparewitheddy.com, and get yours now with $50 off. These emergency food kits come with over 2,000 calories per day and last up to 25 years. That's preparewitheddy.com. Get $50 off each plus free shipping. Once again, that is preparewitheddy.com. Thank you and God bless. Welcome back to Shoot Me Straight and another edition of the series Truth About Transition. This is our third one, and we are blessed once again to have the lovely Andrea Gallagher with us, my beautiful wife and best friend. But today we're going to go over some treatments because we've gotten a bunch of inquiries about, what treatments have we done or have I done since I got out to get us to where we are now. So we are going to go through the the laundry list of treatments that I did and sort of give you guys a review of each one and our opinion on each one. And once again, that is our opinion. We're not medical doctors or anything like that. We can just give you what we experienced by doing each treatment and the benefits that they did for us or the non-benefits. But first, I want to say, since we started this series, we've gotten a lot of positive feedback. Obviously this is our third one, but this, we've said it before, this was on our heart to do for a while, and so we pulled the trigger. And the amount of positive feedback that we have received just lets us know that we are doing the right thing, and that we are helping other couples out there that are struggling or have questions. So that is the point of all this, and we just appreciate all of you that are following and listening and giving us those positive feedback and positive critiques. So we will begin.
Well, I pulled this note out and sent it to you the other day, and you're like, how did you remember all this? I'm like, no, honey, I did this in 2020. But obviously, we are going to work from this list. And so, in essence, I think everyone's probably pretty aware, you exited the military very dramatically in 2019. And then at that point, we had decided we really needed to do a concentrated effort because part of the reason was you were in the Niko clinic when you got ripped out, thrown in jail, then went to trial.
Yeah.
So Niko was something that was supposed to give you kind of the holistic tools of how to exit the military, identify some of the issues, but you were one of the people that, and not everybody gets that. So maybe let's talk about that first. You really didn't get the full spectrum of everything that, they had cataloged. You had a certain amount, but then they were supposed to be giving you more of a full billet of like, hey, this is what you have, this is what's going on.
Yeah, so that's correct. So Niko, and I went to Intrepid Spirit, which is a branch off of Niko, which it's pretty much the same. It's just a different name up in Camp Pendleton. And the way Niko was being used at the time, and I don't know if they've changed it or not since then, but it's pretty much, for at least for team guys, it's a place to go before you retire so you can get the full head-to-toe assessment of all the damage that has been done over your past career. And like most of us, we're told from the beginning not to be a sick bay commando, not to be a whiner, to suck it up. So a lot of us don't have a lot of the injuries that we sustained in our medical record. So I think for guys, it's primarily used, and I was one of them. I was like, I want to get checked out and get my medical record beefed up because that pays dividends when you do retire, especially when applying for disability. Niko is about, I think, 4 weeks, and it's inpatient. So I was able to stay there at a house right across the street. It's done very professionally, and when you go there, they pretty much, like I said, do a head-to-toe assessment. That you get everything: MRIs, brain scans. If you haven't, if you think you broke something or whatever, X-rays, and then they'll pretty much give you a diagnosis of like, hey, this is what's going on. And while they're doing that, the finding out what's wrong with you. They also put you through classes, how to meditate. It's a lot of holistic things to practice, and those are all, I mean, it's all beneficial, but it's only to a certain point, right? It's 4 weeks, and then the problem I have with it is they beef up your medical record. They're like, here you go. This is what's wrong with you. And we gave you, hour classes here and there on how to do certain things. But in reality, it's sort of like when you're done, you're like, and see ya, right? Yeah. That's it. You're on your own. There's no follow-up ongoing care. And obviously my case was a little bit different because I was ripped out halfway through. Right. But I think even if I had stayed for the full duration, I'm grateful for it. Grateful that they took the time to look at everything that was wrong and give me some course corrections, on how to fix myself. But even if I had stayed for the whole time, I don't think I would have continued doing the things that they had told me to do because, I need, some people need a trainer to work out, or else they can't. I mean, for some of us, it's I need someone to guide me through what to do in certain situations. So, obviously got ripped out of there and then went through our whole shenanigans and ended up retiring in 2019. Yeah.
So the one thing I think was good about the Niko experience, even though it did not go according to plan, was that it gave us some basis in diagnostics of what was actually going on with you in certain capacities. They did certain scans, but then you weren't able to get others. So we don't really have a good perspective on that one. So that was just to preface, this is what we did when we were actually out of the military, post-military, in the full transition process. And really what we did was we piecemealed together different nonprofits, organizations, or points of contact that we built out, kind of what we're going to talk about. So. Yeah. So we'll go into that, and the first one that I think was really instrumental in so many ways was Seal Future Foundation, which at that time was ran and founded by our good friend Johnny Wilson.
Yep, who has been a prior guest.
Right, and one of the things that I would say first and foremost of any treatment that you go through, and we'll talk about this more, is establishing a baseline. And so what they did was they got your blood work. They really did a full gamut panel of where are you at, what are your levels, what's going on internally. And from that point, they go a more holistic route. So they prescribed you different supplements to take, and that was kind of the course that you were on with them. So that was Dr. LeMay.
Dr. LeMay.
Who you're still working with.
Yep.
So let's talk about Seal Future Foundation. And then I just want to preface this before we get into all of these. We're going to always, at the end of Eddie's kind of talk about his experience, we're going to go through these 5 components, which is he's going to kind of give an effectiveness rating of 1 to 10, the accessibility, meaning are these treatments readily and widely available for people? Is it sustainable, or is it something you're still doing on an ongoing basis? Are there any side effects? And we're just going to give our honest feedback. This is obviously just with you. We can't say with other people, and that's what we'll also kind of dive into. Some people have had great experiences with some of these. Ours are specific to us. And then the personal experience side of it, just how it's kind of improved your physical health, stress, and relief. So just to give people that context. So with Seal Future Foundation, what did you...
So Seal Future Foundation has been like a godsend, especially and for not just me, but for many team guys, right? Obviously, they just work with SEALs. I'm not sure if they work with any other EOD or SWCC. They might, but obviously it's in the name, Seal Future Foundation. And they, right when I got out, I had contacted Johnny Wilson, or we'd been in contact, and he was like, hey, let's get you started. They work on a physical, mental, and spiritual approach. But the first thing, they were like, hey, you need to go get your blood work tested so we can see what you're deficient in, what's going on. And so, they hooked me up with, it's Regenesis, where Dr. LeMay works, and that is in Pensacola, which is an hour drive from here. But at the time, everything was done do Zoom because that's when COVID had kicked off and the pandemic was going on. So I did a lot of my first appointments through Zoom. And so the first thing he did was set me up to go get a blood panel done, which I, went to a local lab here, got that done, sent it in. And then it literally was like probably a couple weeks later, it was a turnaround, and he's like, hey, here's what we have for your blood work. Here's what you're low in. Here's the things that you need to take for supplements to get back up. And then, they test everything. I mean, from, your testosterone to your, they had this thing, I think one of the most awakening things that they tested for, and I still don't know how they did it, but they tested my fight or flight response. Yeah. And when I went in there, they were like, hey, you're at 95% of your day, you're in fight or flight.
And you could tell that through your when we saw that, it was like, oh, that kind of makes sense.
Well, after having them explain it to me, it made sense. But even for me, when they told me, I was like, that's impossible. I don't feel like I'm in fight or flight. And what he told me, he's like, that's because you've been in fight or flight for 20 years. Yeah. And it's become part of your norm. You don't know any different, which is why, I'd wake up irritated, angry, and for no reason. But it was because my body, right when I would wake up, would shoot into fight or flight, and you're looking.
Well, it causes irritability, anxiety, you're on edge, you're not understanding why why that's going on.
So, they test all those things, and from there they gave me a regimen of supplements to take each day. And I think when we started off, it was a lot. But each of these supplements aren't anything that you have to. I don't know. They're most of them are over the counter.
Yeah,
you can get them.
Yeah, I think they are
from anywhere. But Regenesis obviously has a plethora of them, so they would send them. They send them to the house. And what Seal Future Foundation does is the first year everything's on them.
Right.
So any treatments, any medications, anything is covered by them, and then obviously following on that, you are covered by TRICARE. So the price, you still pay a little bit, but it's cut down tremendously. I definitely, the effectiveness of that, because it's still ongoing, and I still go see Dr. LeMay, I would say it's a 10 out of 10 for me. I would say the accessibility, for me, like I said, it's an hour away. So it's not too much of a pain to go.
Well, hold on one second. Before I get into all that, they also put you on testosterone.
Yes.
What do you think are the positive effects from that, and why did they put you on testosterone?
Well, they put me on testosterone because obviously, and this is a phenomenon that people can't understand, is most team guys or most guys in special operations have the testosterone of an old lady, and which you would think it would be the opposite, right? Everyone's, they look at special operations as these big alpha male warriors and, this and that, but it's due to, it's a bunch of factors, right? One being the lack of sleep we get, the diet that we're on, because when you're operating and constantly working, you're not eating the healthiest. And then just the injuries you get from the training and doing the job overseas, the explosions, taking those little micro explosions from shooting Gustavs, explosive breaches, and stuff like that really has an effect on the frontal lobe of your brain, and that can cause also a decrease in testosterone. And I'm not, like I said, I'm not a doctor, so there's probably a lot of other factors that cause that, but I would say the big thing is the lack of sleep, and because that sleep is really the main component here. That is how you heal. And
you hadn't had stable sleep for
years. Yeah. And you don't, and just like being in, I didn't know I was in fight or flight 90% of the day. I didn't know I wasn't getting proper sleep either. I was just this is the way I operate. And it was detrimental to, obviously, my body.
Yeah, and a lot of times now they're like, oh, you just have sleep apnea. And they're not really addressing the real fundamental problems. So how did the testosterone help with that? And then can you talk a little bit about that? Because I think there's a lot of people that get on it and they want to freaking juice it up. And it's not advisable.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point, right? So when he put me on my regimen of testosterone, I'm taking 0.5 a week, which is a very minimal amount. He just wanted to get me to a normal baseline.
Stability.
And I think, my testosterone, I'd have to look, but it was like, at the 200s, which is very low. So he was like, we'll get you back up to 800, which is, for my age, a normal range. And I think a problem with a lot of people, and I know testosterone's huge now. Everybody wants to get on TRT, and not just from the military world, but also civilians, right? You see these wellness places opening up all over. But it's very dangerous, like if you aren't doing it properly, to overdo it. And let's just face it, a lot of guys are like, well, why be at 800 when I could be at 1600? The problem with that is you put too much into you, you're going to start seeing reverse effects,
Right.
Especially if you stop taking it or have a break from it, your body's going to shut down because you've been feeding it so much testosterone. So it's, I would say, and I tell guys this all the time, it's, if you are going to get on TRT, do it smartly, have a doctor walk you through it at what level you should be at that is safe for you, that is healthy for you, and that you can sustain that.
Right.
And that's the other thing. If you take too much, and I've seen it with guys, like there's a roller coaster effect where you're real high one day, maybe for a couple of days, and then you're dipping down low because your body is trying to regulate itself. And if you're constantly putting way too much testosterone in it, and it's just like anything else you give your body, right? You give it too much, your body doesn't know how to handle it, and so it'll be constantly trying to self-regulate. So yeah, and I would say on the testosterone, I'm like, that has also been a 10 out of 10 for me. As soon as I started taking it, my sleep improved, my overall mood improved. And people think, oh, you're juicing, you're getting huge, you're gonna get huge. It doesn't do that for you. It definitely gives you. I mean, I had a little bit of energy, like, okay, more motivated to work out. And I'd always been motivated to work out. And that's what was so surprising to me when my testosterone was low. I was like, well, I work out every day. I do all these things. And he's like, that has nothing to do with it. But I did obviously feel better when I was working out. And then the recovery from working out and just doing the normal day activities improved big time.
Yeah.
I mean, what did you see?
Well, I think that the key with that was working with a foundation, and clearly, accessibility, obviously not everyone has access to this foundation, but there is a lot of places that do this. So I would say my key to this is establish a baseline, and the baseline was established through getting your blood work done with them and them seeing like, whoa, these are some of the problems that no matter what we did, if we didn't tackle this first, then we wouldn't have been as successful. So I think that this was a critical step.
Yep.
I would say, it was interesting to me. I mean, seeing kind of the dynamics of, they gave you printouts of like, several pages saying all this different stuff. And it was kind of like shocking to look at like, wow, you're super out of whack. I remember you showing me like your levels were completely jacked. And that's why, so it gave kind of a better, I guess, perspective on why some of this stuff was happening. And then I would say between the blood work and getting that baseline, the supplements, and knowing that you were treating it in a holistic way, it wasn't going to be an overnight fix, but it was going to be a path that we were on. And then the testosterone, which was going to address some of the major factors, like you said, sleep and some of those other issues. I think overall that was one of the probably most fundamental things that I think if anyone is looking to start, this is where they start, right? And that's where we're still doing this. So as far as effectiveness, 10, I would say for both of us. Accessibility, find a facility. These are all over now. You can do this anywhere really, and sometimes it's covered, sometimes you can get things underwritten if you're a military service member or first responder. Sustainability, I think it's especially for you, this is an ongoing thing. You've been doing this consistently, you're always being monitored, you do the blood work, you go there, they still do the same thing to ensure that you're on the right track. So that's huge.
So just for the listeners out there, I mean, every 3 months, I go get my blood work done, and then I'll go back to Dr. LeMay, and he'll read my blood work, and here's how it works. Like, he'll look at it and be like, okay, you don't need to take this anymore. Your levels are good. cut this out,
Right.
and then everything else is looking good. Like
Yeah.
there's really nothing. So he's very intelligent,
Right.
and he actually cares about his patients. So he wants to make sure that they're getting the most benefit, but also not overdoing it and just
Right.
giving them stuff to give them stuff. Because, and I think I just wanted to address, that I'm saying, yes, TRT did work for me. It's not for everybody. So don't
Right.
think like, oh, I have to go get on TRT because I'm having problems. A lot of the times they'll test you and be like, yeah, you don't need it. And I've had actually friends who went to get tested for it, and what they found out is it's just their estrogen levels were way too high from other factors from doing the job as well. So all they just needed to take was estrogen blockers to sort of level themselves out.
Right. So side effects, I think there was really no downside.
No, I think it was when I first started out, there was definitely some testing the waters, and like some of the supplements I was taking, definitely had not like reverse side effects, but I felt a little bit different. And it's just, I think just adjusting to those supplements and realizing like, okay, these are the supplements working, and I need to stay consistent. And that is the main thing here is once you start, you need to try and stay consistent. And it is an ass pain, like to take that many supplements. I mean, I remember you're the organized one in the family. So you went out and bought a little pill box for me to put all my stuff in days of the week so I could remember. And there's some that you got to take at night.
Yeah.
So just setting yourself up for success in that manner. If you are given the supplements to take, to make sure you are consistent with it and just try to organize yourself. Or I'm the most unorganized person in the world, so having someone that is organized help you out so you can maintain.
And I would say, obviously, we've been sharing our personal experience with it, but my one caveat is make sure you go to a trusted professional like Dr. LeMay and Regenesis, because I have heard horror stories about people going to these people that are trying to pump them full of stuff, make the money, all of that, and you can really jack yourself up.
We've had friends here that have gone.
Do not go to someone that you don't trust. Do not go to someone that's trying to sell snake oil or put you on 10 times the dose. So that would be my only warning to people is that.
Yeah. And I could tell you like another side effect of taking too much testosterone, because I truly believe one of the reasons we lost Dan Cirillo, who was on this podcast, and he told me when the day he came to visit, he's like, I think I'm going to have a heart attack because I was taking too much testosterone, double, triple the amount. And so that is one of the side effects. So if it is sad, and it, it's just something that he said to me. I don't know if that is the main contributing factor, but I think it's pertinent to say because he did voice that to me when he was here. So I just put that out there also for guys that are like, and I know, oh, fuck that. Like, I'm going to take this much, like 2 is 1, 1 is none.
Yeah.
It's like, well,
let's be honest. That's the mentality of a lot of people that we're talking to. So.
Exactly. So yeah, for you guys out there that are looking to get on it, or maybe you're on it right now and you're taking a bunch, like just know like it does affect everything in your body, and there can be some just tragic results from taking it.
Anything we're talking about here, do it responsibly.
Yes.
Obviously, I think that's the overall theme. Okay, so then the next thing that we had the opportunity to do, you were, the foundation is called America's Mighty Warrior Foundation. It was founded by Debbie Lee, who her son is Mark Lee.
Yeah, I went to Buds with Mark. We were good buddies, and he was the first SEAL killed in Iraq. And his mother founded America's Mighty Warriors.
And so her focus is HBOT therapy, and she basically gifted you or funded 60 plus sessions of the HBOT therapy. And she actually has where if it's in a location that it's accessible to you, you can choose a location and she underwrites it. So let's talk a little bit about that, and then we can get into where you did it and kind of those things.
Yep. So when we're talking about America's Mighty Warriors, just know like they help everybody. If you're a veteran, if you are a vet, not everybody, but if you are a veteran, she will help you like in some capacity. And that right there. So that was the obviously first treatment, really.
Really, yeah.
And we found a hyperbaric chamber.
There's one
10
here
minutes,
in
yeah.
Destin, Dr. Zant.
Dr. Zant, yeah.
Eddie Zant, ironically.
Eddie Zant, yeah.
Another Eddie.
So she was able to fund that, so I was able to go, and I think I did, 60 dives.
2 a day.
Yep, yeah. And that, that is definitely a time suck because you're spending
It's a commitment.
like about 3 hours out of your day over there. So like it's an hour and a half each session. The results I got out of that, and I think after doing about 10 sessions, I started feeling a little bit like the clouds were parting, and I could maybe the fog was lifted a tiny bit, and I could start thinking a little bit clearer. I definitely, your body feels better, and that's just natural. I mean, for people out there that scuba dive, if you go down under compressed air, you come back up, your body feels good, and you're able to run and do whatever a little bit better. But that is, I mean, for me, and again, this is just for me, that's about the only effects I felt from that. While I was doing it, I kept a positive attitude. I'm like, okay, what's going to be the outcome of this? And like I said, the fog was lifted a little bit, but that's about where it ended for me. Especially after 60 dives.
I think, did you sleep a little bit better? Do you remember?
I don't remember being in like a remarkable change in sleep. I think I just felt my body felt a little bit better.
Right.
But I mean, for me, I give that a 5 out of 10.
Okay.
But that I also know I've talked to other individuals
Right.
that have had great results from it.
Yeah, miraculous turnarounds.
There's miraculous stories of like Alzheimer's patients and everything else being able to start functioning again from doing that. And honestly, my dad, who has Alzheimer's now, but at the time he was an early onset.
Left side aphasia.
Side aphasia. We sent him down there to, I think it was on the east coast of Florida. And after talking to him after he did it, and he was a veteran, I noticed some improved results just from having conversations with him.
I will say that was a different, I think, organization that we went through for that. And here's what I will say about this. And again, this goes with every single thing. The one thing that we didn't do was we did not get a baseline scan of your brain before we did this treatment. And I think that was no fault of Debbie's. I think that when we chose this one, we chose it for closeness and accessibility. And I just don't think that was something that was offered. And we were too new to the game to realize, okay, well, if we don't have that baseline, how do we know what improvement took place? So usually, and sometimes with different organizations, and these organizations are now more prevalent, and HBOT therapy is more prevalent, they will do an initial scan and they will do a scan after to show any brain improvement. So
I did so when I went and did those dives, I did take tests when I was there. So they gave me a baseline test. It's like a written test, or not written, but a computer. So you're answering questions, and a lot of it is like how fast your brain is, working. And so they gave me one at the beginning, one in the middle, and one at the end.
Okay.
And I actually and
got worse.
Yes, my last test was remarkably worse than my first one, which I don't know what that says. And I think that's my one issue, not with the HBOT, but just going to get that treatment right off the bat. There were so many other factors going inside me internally that I don't think HBOT was the cure for everything that was going on.
Right.
So for me, that baseline test that they were doing and then the test in between, I was like, well, I was struggling that day with anxiety, or like I was in a bad mood. My fight or flight was up, and I just wasn't able to concentrate on the test. So those things I didn't really, I took with a grain of salt, really. Like, okay, we'll see what this does. But at the end of the day, I'm grateful for it. I'm grateful that I was able to do it. It's definitely pushed me in the right direction. And I'm grateful that Debbie Lee has that foundation.
Usually we'll say is a lot of this stuff, they're pieces of the puzzle that have gotten you from where you were at to where you're at now. Some of them have we had better personal effects or maybe, lesser, but it doesn't mean, like, again, for some people, there's these experiences for some have huge effects. And there's really no technical side effects
No.
to that either.
No, I mean, there's not any bad side effects to doing it. I mean, you could have it, you could be perfectly healthy, get in there, do it, and feel fine afterwards. I mean, people have them, people buy them and put them in their basements.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I would say sustainability, it can be expensive if you don't have someone underwriting it.
yes.
There's a lot of time involved. So the time factor, I mean, a lot of people don't have, weeks on end to do. So thank God, we did at that time. So I think it was definitely part of the overall process. Let's also talk about Dr. Zant was the one who got you your medical marijuana card.
Yes, he did. I saw that right when I went in his office. He was giving those out, and yeah. So obviously, the state of Florida, marijuana is you can use it if you have a card, and so you can go to dispensaries if you have a card here. So yeah, I got a medical marijuana card through him. Because I was like, you know what, I'm going to give this a go, and yeah, I went. And that was another sort of feeling out process, like what works, what doesn't, and I will. For me, it is definitely beneficial, and I know that marijuana is looked at in different lights. Like everyone's like, oh, that's a drug, and that's the way we grew up. That marijuana is a gateway drug to crack and everything else. I mean, that's what we were told. And so when I first started using it again, there was definitely like a bit of like, I'm doing something wrong, like this, because that's just the way, we were brought up. But I can honestly say that it is definitely beneficial for me. It's not for everybody. That's, to each his own. But I had so much anxiety at the time, and I still do. It's just something naturally that encouraged me. I mean, a lot of it is genetic, because obviously, Andrew, my parents, and
I've met them.
Yes, and so that definitely I get that naturally, but also I wouldn't even say it from my time in combat. It was mine all stemmed from what happened to me at the end of my career. That gave me extreme anxiety. I was super anxious when I got out. My confidence was gone. And so that I use it as a medicine. So it's if I start feeling like real anxious and there's nothing I can do to control at the time, and I do practice breathing, like, okay, let's calm down. And it's just sometimes that doesn't do it. And it's like, okay, this is not going away. And I'll smoke a little weed or whatever, or take an edible, and I don't even feel high or anything. I just feel I'm relaxed, and that anxiety's gone, and I can, operate fine.
Yeah. I think we should also mention you're not on any prescription medication.
No.
So,
and that is the other thing is
this
route.
was something that we both agreed that in lieu of prescription medication, that this was a better route. We trusted weed more than we trusted the pharmaceutical companies, and I think that that's bared out to be very true. And for you, to your point, you do struggle daily with anxiety, and I think commingling. Previously you had more. At that time, you had a commingling of depression for sure.
Oh, big time.
That you don't really have as much now, but I would say for you, marijuana has been a key to offsetting I would almost term it at that time, you were in an anxiety depression spiral. We really had a hard time ever getting you out of it, where you had the frequency, and I would always do it like this, like you were just like this.
Yeah.
And we had a really hard time getting you stabilized to where you didn't have something triggering you, and it was almost like an exhausting roller coaster that we had been on. And a lot of the circumstantial stuff of the SEAL teams is understandable, right? Like, okay, he's leaving for a workup, he's leaving for deployment, and then you have the SEAL teams to blame. Oh, it's the op tempo. Oh, it's this, and then we're sitting there through COVID, not doing anything. Like, holy crap, you need to something's got to give here.
Yeah, and so that I think that's important. So to note that as I'm going through these treatments, the whole time, like especially in the beginning, I was a roller coaster of anxiety, depression, still angry. So I was trying to deal with all that, and it wasn't like I was just letting it fly. Like, okay, this is the way. I wanted to fix it, but which is why we were doing these treatments. I was like, well, one of these has to help, right? But unfortunately, I did the HBOT, and like I said, that had some benefits, but the anxiety, all that was still there, which was pretty much the forefront of my problems. And that's why I was like, all right, I'm going to try this, get the medical marijuana card. And I will also say this. I went to the VA right when I got out to check in, my local VA, and right away they wanted to throw me on a plethora of prescriptions. And this is about a half-hour conversation I had with them. Like a lady looked over my record, and they're like, yep, here, you're going to take all these. And I told them, I was like, I don't want any pharmaceuticals. And they were like, well, what are you going to do then? And I was like, well, I think I'm going to try the medical marijuana. And they were like, well, then we can't give you any prescriptions. And I was like, that's the point.
They were relentless too. They
But
really wanted you on those pills.
Yes, they for weeks after that, they were texting me.
Which is sad to say, because so many people struggle with abuse, and we've had personal experiences of what these prescription meds can do, and it's like, for people that have that propensity to pop pills, I can see why they can't avoid it. If you didn't have, you were outspoken about you did not want to be on them, and if they could have worn you down, they would have. So
yeah. And I think the only reason they couldn't is because, I was hooked on tramadol for my last couple years which I'll say this, I managed to push off prescriptions for 18 years, and then I ended up succumbing to, taking some tramadol for my pain. And, like most of us in the community, we have addictive personalities, and if it works, then I'm going to stick with it and keep it going every day. I wasn't taking a lot of tramadol. I was taking 2 a day, but still it's enough you're addicted. Like I wanted those 2 a day to maintain. So I knew I had the wherewithal. Like I was like, I cannot take anything. Like I don't want anything that's going to change the way I think, the way I feel. And so I was like, I'm going to go the medical marijuana route.
Right.
And it's paid dividends.
Yeah. So again, we'll just say you don't use this like crazy. So
no,
again, everything in moderation. You're specifically using it as mostly like a targeted method to target anxiety spikes. And I will say, I think your anxiety in the depression cycle you were in was related to some of the shame, like the shame spiral of like, why am I like this?
Yes.
So that's, and it definitely, I think, blunted that, helped you, and then you then had a better control of yourself and how you felt through it.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And like things, I wasn't getting triggered as much, like about certain things. And it just, it was just even keel.
Yeah. But again, you're not going out there to get blitzed and high or smoking
and I guess,
pot during
we can,
the day, and that's what we should be clear about. Like,
yes, I'm not waking up smoking a joint,
but there's
smoking
people out there that are doing that.
Yeah,
and that's what we need to.
Everything in moderation, and you should be using it for the benefits of it, not just to be stoned all day.
Right.
Which I think we'll get into another treatment that's sort of similar.
Okay. So effectiveness, and this is obviously something that is ongoing. So sustainability, you've continued to use it. It's obviously, everyone knows you can get medical marijuana or whatever. So as far as effectiveness, what would you rate it 1 to 10?
For me, 8 out of 10.
And then, obviously side effects, if you're abusing it, I probably don't need to give that. Just say no to abusing drugs. But yeah, you've obviously gone in your personal experience. So let's go move on to the next, which is right around simultaneously this time. Our last guest was Dr. Chris Free. So I will also say this: I don't think you should just be using medical marijuana to use it and then not addressing any of your underlying issues, right? So you obviously paired talk therapy, couples therapy, and those elements with your journey of addressing some of the things that you were struggling with, whether that was the anxiety, the depression, or some of the residual effects that you had felt going through all the trauma, that not only your career trauma, but going through what you went through right there at the very end.
Yeah.
So let's talk about talk therapy. And this was teletherapy to tell people that there is more teletherapy now.
Yeah.
So talk about that and what your experience was with Dr. Chris.
So yeah, I mean, obviously Dr. Chris, we had him on the last Truth About Transition series, and he was a godsend. I mean, the talk therapy thing definitely took me a while to get comfortable with. And I told him the last time when he was on here, I was like, yeah, the first 2 or 3 times I didn't want to talk to him.
Right.
I didn't trust, and it's just naturally, I was like, I don't trust this guy. I don't know who he is. But I was on a mission to get better, right? And so I was like, I'm going to do the work. I'm going to go through these steps. And so I stuck with it, and finally was able to sort of ease up a little bit with him and really start getting to some deep conversations and about why I was feeling certain things, why I had anxiety, why I had depression, why I would, get angry and spike up. And it's really just diving into what causes each of those. And a lot of it is just, it's background stuff, from your childhood or certain things like that. So I was able to dig deep with him. And then also knowing that he had talked to, hundreds and hundreds of other special operators who were, he's like, you're just like everybody else. And so it makes you feel better knowing like, okay, I'm not the only one that's feeling like this, because, and I know guys out there that, are going through this. You do think there is a common propensity to think I'm messed up.
Right.
I'm the only one that's going through this. And that brings a lot of shame because as men, especially as special operators, we are, supposed to be bulletproof and like nothing bothers me and this and that. But the true reality is all of us feel the same way. And all of us go through a lot of the similar same struggles. So I think that was really big for me too, is to be able to, because he would share stories with me, and he wouldn't give me other guys' names, but he would be like, hey, I'm talking to this other guy and he's having this, and I could relate and be like, okay. And that sort of let my guard down a little bit as well. It's like, okay, I am feeling that way. And then, I think that what was really awesome with him is he was also talking to you at the same time. He'd have conversations with you without me around. So he was able to like get your perspective and then get mine. And then when he would talk to me, he'd be like, hey, Andrea feels like this way. So it was able to like really help me start putting pieces together, and really figuring out my sanity.
Yeah, I mean, well, and I think also the other thing that in relation to the whole reason we're doing this series is you are removed from your community, from your brothers. You're now disenfranchised, not only because of what we went through, but then also you're on the outside. So you previously could go to work and talk to guys about stuff. You were fairly isolated, and it was COVID. So it was like we had kind of a trifecta of things where, to your point, you're at a loss because you're removed from everything that you once knew. I think there was some identity struggles there that were taking place, not only with what had happened to you, but where you were at, what were you going to do next? There's so many factors that I think you need that time to express and verbalize even fears, maybe not to me, but to someone else, to be like, I am freaking like, you would have never gotten out at that point.
No.
So there's so many factors that I think we probably can't even tether all of the things that we went through at that time that were helped through expressing yourself in a transparent way to someone else that just wasn't me, and maybe even wasn't your friends, to say, this is where I'm at. Like,
yeah. And the big thing is it's talking to somebody that's not going to try to come up with a solution right on the spot. Like, oh, well, just do this. Just, you're depressed, just be happy. Just don't be depressed, which is like a lot of the times, you talk to people like, oh, I'm having this and, this problem. And they're like, oh, well, just don't think about it then. And you're like, it's not that simple. Like, and, believe me. And I think we had these conversations. I'm like, I wish I wasn't like, this is not something that I'm bringing upon myself. Like, it's literally, it's internal.
Yeah.
That I can't control it. But now the thing I learned to do is like, I really can't control it when it comes on, but here are the steps I can do to start mitigating it and helping it go away faster. And to this day, I still I can feel it come on every once in a while, but I haven't really gone into full blown depression,
for a long time.
Knock on wood. But it's because of the work that I did.
Right.
And I'm able to now I know what this is. I feel it coming on. And right away I start doing my breathing exercises and stuff like that to prevent it.
I think the other thing was we identified your emotional intelligence was off.
Yeah.
We talked a lot about that through that course of you had, for right or wrong, from childhood on, detached yourself from your emotions, and you basically had a lot of repressive tendencies that I think also you would always be like, I don't even know. And I'm like, I feel like you're probably thinking or ruminating about this issue, but you're not expressing it, So talk about that, where you as yourself had built up this ability to act like I would always tell you, do we need a feelings chart? Can you point to it?
We actually did.
Yeah, I think we probably did get to that point. So what would you say about that and how to talk therapy, or just learning how to connect with yourself and not act like nothing's wrong, because we're like, no, clearly there's stuff wrong. And I'll use the analogy because when we put Ryan in behavioral therapy to develop his emotional intelligence, we kind of went through, okay, well, anger is a primary emotion, I think is what we would say. And then the secondary emotion, the fireworks, or no, I take that back.
No,
it was
anger's
fear or something. We were trying to relate your primary emotions, which you were completely repressing.
Yes.
And the secondary emotion, which was anger, and the outburst was what we were all seeing, but it was tethered to a primary. And I botched that. But anyways.
No, I'll try and break it down. So I mean, the only emotion I knew was anger.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean I was angry all the time. But I would try, everything had to be even keel. Everything had to be nope, everything's fine. And the second something would come up that caused any emotion sadness,
right.
I guess depression, I would ignore all of that and just
choose anger
and be okay. And that stems, obviously stems from a little bit of my childhood, and because the household was volatile and we had a very crazy lifestyle growing up as far as moving around every 2 years. But I think when I joined the military, you are trained to suppress everything. They call you need to control your emotions. You need to, that's what they call it. And so in my mind, and I think in a lot of guys, it's well, controlling my emotions means I don't feel anything.
Right.
And I will suppress everything and push it down so I can continue to do this job properly. And I think after a while, you can only push down so much. And now, obviously, some of us can push down a lot over years and years and years, but all that stuff will come bubbling back up.
Yeah, and to your own detriment.
Yes.
That's what we learned.
But even I had suppressed myself so much, and I've told, these stories I would lose teammates, and I literally could not get an emotion out. I knew, I was this is tragic. I'm supposed to be sad, I think. I mean, I know I'm supposed to be sad, but I would not feel anything unless I punished myself. So, when Brad and Aaron and all the other teammates I lost, the only way I could get an emotion out is I would have to go on a 15-mile run where I was trying to go as hard and fast as I could, and then I would start crying while I was running, because that's just my body. My body was so used to suppressing everything. And doing that has some long-term effects. And we found that out when I got out. It's like I was unable to have emotional intelligence. Not enabled, but I just didn't have it at the time.
Yeah.
And I had to accept the fact that, I was emotionally deficient or in the intelligence. And I remember, and you were always telling me that, like, you do not have the emotional intelligence. And like, to a Neanderthal like me and everything else, you're like, well, you're saying I'm not intelligent? Like, you take that as like a harsh criticism, I guess, and you're sort of insulted by it. But the reality is, it's like, no, it doesn't mean you're dumb. It just means you need to work on, knowing what emotions you're feeling at the time and addressing them. And so going through the talk therapy really helped me develop some emotional intelligence. I'm still working on it.
Well, but so just the communication in general,
communication, yeah.
Now I would say you're like a great communicator, whereas, oh my gosh, you were like a lockbox. Like, you couldn't get stuff out of you, and then, it was definitely
because you're trained.
Yeah.
If I am open to you and I display any sign of emotion, that's weakness.
Right.
And I am not weak.
Right.
And so I will not do that, which is the wrong answer. I'll tell you that right now.
So as far as effectiveness of talk therapy, teletherapy, couples therapy, or anything related to, like, maybe even behavioral, emotional intelligence to retrain yourself and develop your communication, what would you say effectiveness for that for people?
10 out of 10.
Okay.
By
And
far.
obviously, it's widely accessible.
It is, and I'll say this for for the guys out there listening, and I know that going to talk to somebody is probably the last thing you want to do. And how can someone know what you've been through, and even especially if someone you're talking to hasn't been in the military or hasn't experienced the things you have.
Right.
Guess what? That is their job. They talk to numerous individuals every day that have some trauma in their lives and are dealing with stuff, so they don't have to go through the experiences that you went through. They have learned to be able to deal with these people and help them. So let your guard down a little bit, and just open up and try and talk. And guess what? Sometimes the people that you're going to talk to aren't the ones, and you can always switch people that you talk to. But I would definitely give it a shot. And like I said, it's a 10 out of 10 for me.
Okay, and the side effects were, I would say, mostly positive, but also,
I would have
honest,
some negative ones.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's hard to delve in, especially when you've been repressing stuff for decades. So I think that but you have to be willing to face those.
And that's really what it comes down to. Yeah, I would get on calls with Chris, and I'd get off the call, and we would have, a long hour conversation about stuff, and I would be worse off by the time I got off the call with him, because he did force me to delve into some things, especially like childhood stuff or even some things during my career. And I would be so angry when I got off the phone with him, because I just didn't know where to go with everything I had just opened up. And then I would have anxiety about talking to him the next time. But like Andrea said, like it's part of the process. It's not going to be an easy ride. It's not going to be smooth. It's not going, there's nothing out there that's going to be, unless you take heavy drugs to sedate you and make you numb so you don't feel anything. But that's not the purpose. You're supposed to feel things. You're supposed to feel pain. You're supposed to be, working through your issues. And you have to go into this, if you do want to get healed, knowing like, I'm going to do the work and I'm not going to quit.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about the next one, the stellate ganglion block. This is something that I think is not as widely known about, but I think it's super underrated, because I think it is incredibly non-invasive. It's easy, it's quick. And to me, this was one of those things that I just really felt was like a huge step in the right direction for you. So let's talk about that. This was funded by Seal Future Foundation.
Yep.
It was another treatment that we added to, and people can Google this. You can look up, there was a 60 Minutes episode done years ago. The doctor is Dr. Mulvaney. He was a former team guy. And he personally does it in the DC area, but there are other people that do this.
Yeah. So I think the stellate ganglion block we did, I believe it was like 2022. And this is what we were getting to a point where we were doing the talk therapy. I had done the HBOT. I think we skipped a treatment first.
I know, but
Go back to that.
There's the two that are more in depth, and I just want to be mindful of the time.
Yep. So I had done a couple other treatments, which we'll come back to. And I was really at a point where I was still feeling, the anger was still there, and I was frustrated that I'm doing all this work and I'm still feeling this way. And so Dr. Chris actually had brought it up. He's like, "Hey, have you heard of Stellate ganglion block?" And I actually had heard of it. I had a couple friends that had done it. Guys were doing it in the teams, and it was a mixed bag. It was like some people it didn't do anything for me, and some people were like, "Yes, it worked." And so I was at a point where I was like, I'm willing to give anything a shot. So yeah, I went up to DC, and I got to stay with my good friend Dan Luna and his family, and was able to I went into Dr. Mulvaney's office, and they pretty much they stick a needle. It's a 2-day process, so they stick a needle on one side of your neck, and what it does, and again, I'm not a doctor, so I'll probably jack it up, but it blocks the fight or flight receptors, so you're not going into fight or flight.
And what are they shooting into your neck?
It's a anesthetic.
Okay.
It's a local anesthetic, that is injected into the front of the neck. And
so you had one done on one side the one day, the other done on one side the other day.
Yes.
Like the next day.
And so did those, and came back home, and I can say it was awesome. Like I was like even keeled, wasn't getting triggered by anything. I think you noticed it too.
That was one of the biggest, most positive effects I had seen. I was like, oh my gosh, this is like, you just had a whole different.
I was calm. Yeah, you were calm. I was able to like think through things more, process things better, as far as like emotions and all that, without like spiraling. But that lasted, I think, let's say 5 to 6 months, maybe 4 to 5 months.
The first time you did it was the most and longest effective. And then I think you went back and did it again, and we felt like,
that was a short term.
And that's kind of what we had heard. We had heard the first is the best. But I think, again, it was a building block on a menagerie of treatments that we were doing. That was a step in the right direction and helpful, and it gave you an additional tool in the toolbox.
Exactly. What it allowed me to do was like be even keel for 4 to 5 months, and really then I could actually do the work.
Yes, that's key.
Without being like going down a spiral or being triggered. And so it really helped me dive into, I was still doing the talk therapy, dive into stuff a lot more without having the side effects of like, no, now I'm pissed off again, or now I'm, like the shame and everything else. It just sort of, I don't know. I was all I can describe it as like I felt more even keeled than I ever had, and that definitely, like we said, that wore off, and then I started feeling the same feelings again. So that's when I was like, hey, I want to go back and do it again. And I was told, even Dr. Mulvaney, when he was like, hey, the second time really doesn't last as long. These are some of the results that we have found. And I was like, okay, that's fine. Went back and did it again, and that didn't last too long. Like that lasted, I think, a month and a half.
Maybe,
if that.
I don't even, but again, I think we can't understate the fact that at that point, any reprieve from you being like this was such a huge step in the right direction to do the work, that I would say that one for me was like 10 out of 10, even though it's not, I don't think it's something that you can just keep doing.
No.
So it's not something that I don't think is advisable. I don't know that, to do it a bunch of times, but I actually don't think there's probably any downside to doing it a bunch of times if you felt like it was still having effect.
And again, it's different strokes for different folks.
Right.
Like there are people, when Dr. Mulvaney was telling me he treats Vietnam veterans, and he's like, they'll give them one and it lasts years. Like they don't come back.
Wow.
Like it helps them, but then they're, individuals are like, well, I want it again.
Okay.
And that was, obviously I was one of those individuals that came back and was like, I want it again. But
yeah.
At the end of the day.
And you only ended up doing it twice.
Yes.
And then again, we just moved on from there. But
it helped me, it pushed me forward into my, I guess if you want to call it recovery, right? Of like getting back to baseline or normal. That definitely helped me big time.
Yeah.
And, I'll rate that a 10 out of 10 as well, just because of the effects of it, and just sort of helped me be even keel for that 5 to 6 months, which was awesome. But again, for me, it was a Band-Aid over a bullet hole that helped me, it stopped the bleed for a while. And then again, it started like.
Well, the point of all of this is all of these things are great. You have to still do the work.
Yes.
If you're sitting there, if you're just, popping pills, excessively drinking, not dealing with your issues and whatever, none of this stuff is going to work anyhow. Like it's not going to give you the end result if you're not really, because you were still doing the blood work, doing the talk therapy, doing all these things to move yourself into the right direction. So yeah, none of these are like and we'll get into that more, like there is no magic bullet.
No, there's no game changer.
Yeah. Okay, so let's move on. So, because I want to delve into these last two, which I think are the bigger ones that we did. So, we had decided to work with Vets, which was Amber Marcus Capone founded Vets. It's a psychedelic therapy. They are specifically focused on the special operations community, but there is more widely available psychedelic therapies all over the country now. That are accessible, whether it's ibogaine, ayahuasca, or different types of modalities. So you specifically did ibogaine and DMT.
5-MeO DMT.
Yeah. So tell us about your experience with that.
So that I obviously did that one before the ganglion block. That was, I think we were about a year out of the military, and I had been talking to individuals. We obviously knew Marcus and Amber. I worked with Marcus, and I had been talking to guys online, and that had gone and done it, and it was, the guys that were doing it were like, dude, it's changed my life. Like I no longer drink. I'm not on pills anymore. The critiques or whatever, the reviews I was getting from it that guys were telling me, I was like, okay, I want to go try this. At that point, and I think I was at a point too where I was like, I'll do anything. So we had talked about it, and you were on board. I think you talked to Amber.
Yes.
And so, they flew me out to San Diego. Vets covered it. And then from San Diego, you get into a van and drive across the border to Mexico, and they take you to this beach house, and it's done very professionally. When you decide to do it, they assign you a counselor ahead of time. So I talk to this counselor once a week, and they don't tell you what's going to happen when you take it, but they give you like, hey, you need to cut this out of your diet. Try and like eat healthy for the next month, cut alcohol out. Even to the point where it's like, cut coffee out, which I was like.
Yeah, so this was the preliminary stuff. You're kind of going back.
Yeah.
So this is the preliminary. They had prepped you with a person and a coach before you even went, and there was protocols that you were technically supposed to be following well before you even went and got on a plane and flew there and did it.
And the big one was like practicing your breathing, doing breath work, which I tried, and it's very difficult, but I definitely put the work in.
You stopped alcohol.
Yep. I think the only thing I didn't really stop was coffee, but, I wasn't going whatever, you never go full retard.
Yeah, it's coffee, nicotine,
yeah.
And then I don't know if there was anything else at that time.
That was it. Ended up going to Mexico. They hook you up with EKGs, give you an IV to keep open just in case something happens, and they have just a group there, sort of facilitating everything. They had I don't know if the shaman, this lady came out, and that's one thing, like they did a ritual beforehand, and I am obviously a believer. And so I just went outside and prayed about it. And and took the capsules, and that was a very intense experience. It is about 10 hours, maybe lasts a little longer for some, but it's intense. It's 10 hours of intensity. The way it's described, it's like 50 years of therapy in 10 hours, or something like that.
I mean, Ibogaine is considered the Mount Everest of psychedelics.
Yes.
Let's put it that way. So
it's not a good time. It's not something you would take recreationally. And so, yeah, I took that, and what that did for me is, it had nothing to do with my career, had nothing to do with the crap that happened at the end of my career. It was all childhood stuff. And then, I pretty much watched like a movie, myself being born, and then going all the way through my childhood, and I could stop at any moment and really delve into whatever scene that it was showing me from my childhood. And what it really did was it gave me a better understanding that my dad did his best. He was raised a certain way.
And you even said you saw scenes from
his child, and that's what
which we wouldn't know because he doesn't talk about it.
Yes. That is one thing I don't know, and I think that is a important factor. Is I don't know anything. I barely anything about my dad's childhood because I know it was very volatile, and so he doesn't talk about it. So when I took that medicine, I not only watched myself as a child growing up, but at a certain point, it morphed into I could watch my dad as when he was a child and the way he was treated. And the things that he went through. And these were all very vivid memories. And it's just something I can't explain. But I was able to sort of get a different perspective. Okay, my dad did his best. He wasn't perfect. And I was able to just sort of let go of some of the things that I had been holding on to that I didn't know I was holding on to.
Right.
And then also what it also gave me was the whole time I was seeing all this stuff from my childhood, my dad's childhood, you guys were in the corner,
you were kind of seeing it as a movie, like an old film reel, where you could see the film going across, and we were always in the corner.
Yes, you were always in the corner, beckoning me to come back home with the kids.
Back onto the couch. We're still sitting. We're not leaving our couch.
But yeah, I mean it was okay, I am loved, and I have a family. So, yeah. So, I mean, that was, 10 hours, and I came out of it. It's almost undescribable.
And everyone's experience is different.
Yes.
Because there's some people that sit there and puke.
Oh, I had the guys that were in
purging demons.
Yeah, I had 3 other guys in the room with me, and I could hear them, and they were just puking and purging up all night, and I didn't have any of that.
Yeah.
They were literally like, dude, you didn't move a muscle the whole night. You had a smile on your face, and I truly believe that's because I put in the work before I went. And that drug does try to throw you off. It tries to scare you, but that's what the breathing comes into play for.
And setting your intentions, and you really gave it over to God, and you were already on your faith walk at that point, so I think that was a huge factor. But then the Ibogaine, they do the one day, the next day, they kind of call it that handshake. They do the 5-MeO DMT.
So then you wake up the next day, and you're pretty weak. Everybody sort of, because I think that Ibogaine takes a lot out of you. They give you about the day to recover. I mean, it was pretty awesome. Just there was 3 other SEALs in there. One of them was this real old Master Chief, just freaking awesome dude. But I was able to carry him out to the ocean and sort of get a reset, which was kind of cool. A bunch of team guys going out to the ocean where we belong, and then coming back in. And then that night, or it was the next morning, we did the 5-MeO DMT, and that is it's this. I don't know. I can't. It's like secretion from a toad or something that you end up smoking. And so that is, they call it the handshake. So everything that you were exposed to taking the Ibogaine and trying to process, the 5-MeO DMT helps you release that out of you. And so I ended up doing that. I was the first volunteer to go that next morning, and I took about 3 hits, and each one, you're on a bed and you breathe in real deep for 10 seconds and then let out for 10 seconds, and then you fall back, and then there's no bed there anymore. You're falling, and it's like this intense feeling.
Yeah.
But they coach you like beforehand. They're like, hey, just trust it. Just trust the process, or trust the drug. And so that's what I did. I was like, and I knew, I did enough drugs in high school where I was like, I'm not going to die. But some guys freak out because they just haven't done drugs, and they're like, they're not in control. I learned to let go. It was like, just let go, control. And what that did for me, I can't even, I didn't really get hallucinations or anything like that. It's like this intense amount of love. And I don't know how to properly explain it, except that I've never felt that much like love in my life. Just like, it's like you're exploding with it. And so, I'd come out of each one just bawling my eyes out. So so I did that 3 times, and then you have a chance. You can do it 5, I think, up to 5 times. And so at the 3rd time, even the lady was like, "You're good," and I was like, "All right." So I did that, and then you spend the rest of the time there sort of processing everything. They actually give you classes on like, hey, how to keep this going, and which I think is pretty cool. And honestly, I think from the time that I went to now, they've actually made it a week-long process now, to where they really have like integrated like, hey, here's how you keep this feeling going. So I did that and then flew back home, obviously. And I would say you are on a high from that for a couple months. It's still, the drug is still in you. You're sort of like glowing. You feel reborn. A little bit, it's this weird, it's like a reset almost. And because you just found out like everything that you have been stressing about, or all this other non-essential things, they don't matter. And you really find out what matters in your life. And you're trying to like then readjust and like, okay, I want to focus on everything that does matter to me. But the problem is that drug wears off. And for me, there was a massive dip. When that drug did go off, I went into a deeper, darker depression than I had ever had before. I think this is where, and I will say this, I will give the Ibogaine a 10 out of 10. I definitely think it's beneficial. I think if done properly, it's definitely has a lot of positive results, but it also has a propensity to be super negative too, and non-beneficial, because I think because that drug wears off, and this is again my experience, I went into like this dip, and then you're super frustrated, like. I was just riding high, like I did all this work, and now I'm back to square one, maybe even worse. And I think a lot of guys end up going to do the Ibogaine multiple times because of that dip, and they're like, oh, it didn't work. And that's where I have issues with people that are like constantly saying like, this is the end-all be-all drug, like this changes your whole life. There's nothing out there that's going to like that you're going to take that's just going to be this, and I'm fine the rest of my life. I think that definitely pushed me in the right direction of like, this is how you could feel all the time. This is the way you're supposed to feel. But at the end of the day, you have to do the work, and you have to keep that going, and not by taking Ibogaine again. Over and over. I don't think that's beneficial, and that's again my own opinion. I know guys that have gone back 4 or 5 times, and hey, if that's their journey, fine. But to me, I just found it. I was like, I don't want to depend on this psychedelic each time I start going back into a depression. So I think that is really where, once that happened, that's where the real work started
Right.
for me. I was like, and I at that point, I was so frustrated that I had slipped back into this depression that I was like, I am going to figure out something that will keep me going. And that is where I, started really delving into my Bible, and really made it a point to read my Bible every morning, spend time with God every morning. And, and there's different strokes for different folks. Like some people call it meditating. They wake up and they just want to meditate and breathe. For me, I can't do that. I have to talk to God. Like I have to have some sort of conversation with him to really get into that state.
Well, empower you. But I mean, yeah, let me go back and just say, in relation to the Ibogaine, you came back, you were very raw. Your emotions were at the surface. It was like really definitely refreshing to see. But I will say the way I encapsulate that experience is like, it is like 30 years of therapy in a long weekend. And you are peeling back an emotional onion to where you were so raw at that point that you had the highest highs I'd ever seen and you had the absolute lowest lows.
Yeah.
So, we're honest whenever we give anyone feedback about that. We tell them what our experience was. We say, this is what we went through. Obviously, at the end of the day, everyone has to choose what's right for them. But I do think my biggest concern about that is psychedelic therapy now is just a super sexy thing that they're like, oh, it's just, and I think you have to be honest. And that's why we're giving this feedback, is to say, be aware, obviously follow all the protocols, do everything you're supposed to do. But at the end of the day, even if you do, you might receive unintended consequences, because, for instance, there was guys that sat there and puked for 10 hours and you had an amazing experience while you were there, didn't have any issues, and then maybe they came back home, and we've known people, they don't touch another drop of alcohol. They get off drugs. They do all these things. And then for you, honestly, you were like, you still drank, you still did Nicorette, you didn't really make a lot, which to me, I was like, that's kind of weird. I thought maybe you might make some more fundamental changes, but then your emotional state was definitely, like you said, this huge plateau, and then it was like a very steep drop where we were both, I think, maybe taken aback, where if we weren't in a better place, like if we weren't in the place that we were at, I don't know, as a spouse, like you said, you were even messed up, like, I was just on this high. I thought I was through this, and now I'm here. I mean, I think there is a darker side that's not really discussed much by a lot of people that I think that people do need to be aware of. They need to consider it as a part of the process of doing an intense drug like that. If they call it the Mount Everest of psychedelics, there's a reason. So, I just think people need to be aware, and we're always about sharing our open and honest opinion and feedback and being vulnerable about what we went through. And yeah, it was touch and go there for a bit. I was like, okay, are we going to have a new problem here? Like, because it was pretty intense, and you were saying stuff I had never heard you say through our whole marriage that, I think that you and I both, whenever we get the opportunity, we've gone to round tables about this. We've met with members of Congress. We obviously are very supportive of what Marcus and Amber do. But we've always been like, it is a newer therapy, and it's more of a pioneering of it. And I don't think it's ever fair to say whether any of these that we're talking about, oh, this is the end all be all. Like, and everything about it is perfect.
I think the
everything we're talking about is, there's positives and negatives.
I think the fact that it gets guys off prescription drugs, alcohol,
incredible.
and that drug started off getting people off heroin. That was what people were doing it for. So yeah, I think that is huge, and I'm a huge proponent for it. But just like anything else, it's like, proceed with caution.
Right. Okay, so let's go into, at that point, coming through that. And again, I think the stellate ganglion block was also after that, but we're going to go into one of the bigger last things that we did. Obviously, you've shared a lot. You were already on this personal journey. Not only had you experienced kind of an awakening of, you had to really let go while you were incarcerated, give everything over to God. So you kind of started on that. And then we got the opportunity, both you and I, to go to a program called Operation Restored Warrior.
Yes.
So you went and attended October 22nd through 26th of 2020, and I attended November 16th through the 19th of that same year.
Gosh, was it that long ago?
I guess. Geez, I don't know. Where is time going?
Yeah.
So let's talk about that experience and what it is. We have about 10, 15 more minutes to wrap it up.
Yeah, so Operation Restored Warrior, I will go ahead and say I was duped into going.
By my wife.
By my wife and by Paul Lavelle.
And Julie Smith.
And, well, Julie, yes, but you got me on a phone call with Paul randomly one day, and I was reluctantly got on the phone, and then he was like, hey, you're coming next week. And I was like, what? And he's like, yeah, see you there. And that was it. And then I was really ticked that you had done that. And so I was like, but I was going. I was like, all right.
And this is a full-on spiritual type thing.
I had no idea.
Yeah.
Either.
I did, and I was like, you need Jesus more.
I had no idea what
like, no
this
drug
thing
is going to work this as well as Jesus.
And that is the truth. But yeah, even Paul on the phone didn't tell me anything. He's like, you just show up. So I showed up, flew into Colorado, and you just give you instructions to meet in this lobby. And then there was like 5 other individuals who I didn't know there. None of us knew each other, but we'd all. And then the funny thing was, each of us had been duped into going. Nobody wanted to be there. It was like not one person was like, "Hey, I'm excited."
Usually, for people, this is a last-ditch effort. People are at their
yes, and I can tell
point.
you, the people that I saw that I went there were at their last ditch. I mean, guys had tried to commit suicide. I mean, and so we ended up going to this cabin in the mountains, and it was like you said, it was a spiritual retreat, but it wasn't like they were shoving Jesus down your throat. It was very like, hey, they went over just what good and evil was, and like what being, that we're constantly in a battle of good and evil. And they play movies for you, like, hey,
that was a really cool thing.
which was spoke to, I think, for
for
me,
you especially.
I think guys in general were like, oh, okay, yeah. But then, during that time, you just have a lot of self-reflection. They give you little missions to do, like while you're there, like go out by yourself into the mountains, and then just let God speak to you. And it really all culminates at the end. You have this, the meeting. I had a meeting with one of the cadre, just one-on-one, and again, it was like very similar feeling to the Ibogaine, except there was no drugs involved.
It's spiritual, yeah.
I again just like purged. I was, everything out. That I was crying. I mean, it was just a lot of stuff that I had still just left in me. But what was crazy about it is there's no drugs involved at all, and I came out of there feeling on a high, just like maybe even more than the Ibogaine. And it really just reintroduced my relationship to Jesus, that I needed it. Because I think I tell the story all the time. I found Jesus when I was in a prison cell. I was super close to him, but then when I got out, dealing with, everything that we're talking about now, and then plus all the other crap from, our story, and I think it was a lot to take on for me, and I distanced myself from Jesus. Again, not intentionally. It was just the way things were going. So I really needed that to reintroduce myself and reintroduce my relationship with Jesus. And I think, that was probably one of the biggest game changers for me. Just on a realistic level, like, and that is because that is something I could sustain every day.
And you can tap into the Holy Spirit every single day.
Every single day.
Anytime, no matter where you are. And that's what I'm saying. Like, I think out of all these things, that's the only thing that I would say. It's sustainable. There's, I would say the side effects are similar to a talk therapy, though. Like, you probably, I think people go there and they delve into stuff, and sometimes stuff they didn't even know they had repressed. And so I've had experiences, even who I went with, she's like, they told me things I didn't know about myself that are.
Yeah, and that's, I don't want to get too much into the weeds of like what they
Right.
actually do there, because even if I explained it, listeners wouldn't even believe it half the time. But yes, there is.
They have a spiritual gift, and they're using
Miracles
it.
happen there.
Yes.
I witnessed actual miracles happen
Right.
in front of my face, to where, and I'm just like most guys or most people, like I'm going to question everything.
Cynical, yeah.
Yes, I'm going to be like, that doesn't make logical sense,
Mm-hmm.
and don't believe it until you see it with your own very eyes,
Mm-hmm.
and you're like, there is no doubt.
Mm-hmm.
I have no doubt in the world anymore.
Yeah.
And that's really what it did for me, and it's just reinforced my faith.
Yeah, and I think you coming from a Catholic upbringing, and then I came from like a traditional conservative Protestant upbringing, I was always like, oh, Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. And you're like, oh, what?
Sure.
But yeah, yes, I'm Catholic, I know.
Yeah.
But then I think it was also, I think that's really what galvanized like your daily walk with the Lord, and really tapping more into that, and knowing it like God as like the Trinity, like Father, Son, Holy Spirit. You have something within you that's going to help you. It's going to enable you. Like even with all the things that we've talked about, whether it was the depression, anxiety, I think it's made you more malleable too, to like, I think that would helped you to abandon like the ego of all of like, I can do it myself. And it's like a lot of times now you're like, I can't, I'm going to go to God. Or we like, I think we joke about it. Like, I don't think you said sorry the first 17 years of our marriage, like, or not that long, but you know what I'm saying? Like
It could have been.
but you
Yeah.
really didn't know, like you really had not ever walked in that way of, okay, even now, like let's say something goes wrong or we have a disagreement. I mean, the turnaround of you having the thought process, being able to be like, I'm sorry I did that or said that or whatever. I mean, wow, we would have waited weeks for something like that to happen. So it is pretty miraculous, the culmination of all these things. And then I just think you're so much more intimately acquainted with your own self. And I think the last thing to wrap it up is, I mean, I think a lot of your story is around love and acceptance of yourself. And I think we've talked about it too. Like you are sometimes, and I think a lot of your friends struggle with this, right? You can sometimes things that your internal dialogue and things that you would say to yourself, or the way that a lot of your friends too beat themselves up or whatever. What would you say about, to wrap it up, all these things that you did, and just, I think at some point you got to make peace with yourself, and I think you did that through God, but how would you explain, you just are so much more able, it seems, to pivot and tap into, okay, this is what's happening. I'm having anxiety. Like before, you had a hard time even saying you had anxiety, and now you talk openly about it. So how do you think that all adds up?
I think, well, through all of these treatments,
Yeah.
I was each one, and it made me more self-aware of who I am and like what goes on internally inside me, and it's still a work in progress. Like I'm not like, oh, everything's great. Like I think that's one thing people need to hear, especially guys. Like this never ends.
No,
It's
journey.
ongoing work. But it does get easier the more and more you work at it,
Right.
and just the work becomes easier. It becomes a habit or a routine. But through all those treatments, I was able to become somewhat emotionally intelligent and start really like, oh, okay, this is what goes on internally inside me, and really,
I think it gave you access.
yes,
But
and
then
it
you had to
also
do the
helped me
work.
let my ego down a little bit and be like, yeah, I do have depression. I have anxiety. Where before, if I was in the teams and you would have been
You
like,
would never
you depressed,
said
I'm like,
that.
you pussy. Like,
Yeah.
you have depression. You have anxiety. You're weak. Like, that's just the way it went in the teams, and
But that was also an internal dialogue that you
Well,
had
that's
for a very long time.
yes. If any, and I thought if anything
Very
was wrong with
negative.
me, and it's just like, I still, and there's good times to have that kind of internal dialogue. Like if you're being lazy, or
Sure.
you can look at yourself in the mirror and be like, "You little bitch, like go work out, like
Yeah.
stop making excuses." But that's like almost positive negative talk. There's also negative talk where it's like, where I would feel shame for having depression or anxiety and not knowing what was wrong with me. Then I would look in the mirror and be like, "You are like you're this much of a mess up. You're nothing. Like your family doesn't
Yeah.
deserve you."
And it was hard for me.
Or not, you don't deserve your family.
Yeah.
Like the negative talk you will spiral, and I think that is the big thing is
Yeah.
I've gotten to a point now where I don't really have that much negative talk in myself. When something does go wrong, instead of going negative, I'm like, okay, how am I going to solve this right now? And that is where all this stuff has gotten me to. And then obviously now, and I say this every time I get up in the morning, I ask God to get me through the day. I'm like, I can't do it. Yeah. I don't have the ability or the strength to like fight off all these things. So I ask him, like, dude, please help me like get around these things for the day. And if I am feeling them, give me the wisdom to get through them.
Yeah.
And he does.
Yeah.
And so, I think that is the one thing, for guys, it's really hard for us, man, to be that self-aware and to actually let that ego down and admit like, okay, something is wrong with me, and I need to fix it. And just know like there is a light at the end of the tunnel. It's there, and you just have to do the work, and the work is not easy. But guess what? Especially coming from the special operations community, I'm like, you already have the drive, you have the grit, you have the determination. Start using all those characteristics that you use to get into the special operations community now to get out and to start your new journey and have that same attitude, and just don't quit.
Yeah. And don't just do it for you, do it for your family. Do it
Well,
for
that's
your
what
loved ones.
I think that's what we do it for to begin with.
Well, yeah.
And that's what I started off with. I need to do this for my family, but at the end of it, it's like, no, you need to do this for yourself.
Yeah.
And those conjoin.
Yeah.
Really.
Right. For sure. Well, I'm proud of where you are. You have put in a lot of hard work.
Well, that's because I got you by my side, and I always say that too. I probably couldn't have done all this without well, you're my best friend, but like a supporting spouse that is willing to stick it out with you. And that's what I tell spouses too, and especially my buddies that are getting out. I'm like, just be patient. Be patient with them, because it's going to be a bumpy road. Right. And I think, and we've talked about this on our last podcast, that's where a lot of divorces happen after the getting out. And just so you're fighting it together.
Yeah. Yeah. All right.
All right, baby. Hey, so for all the listeners out there, hey, like I said in the beginning, we love all the feedback.
Yes.
And if there is anything that you would like us to cover, we just covered the treatments, and we're going to have on some more guests in the future here. But please, we read all the feedback, and it'll just help us more for the next episode.
Yeah. All right.
All right. Thank you. God bless, and we're out.